Hey there. So we've got the full moon in Libra happening in about half a day's time, 12 hours time. And it packs a punch. It is pretty high powered, I would say. So the full moon, this always happens when the sun and moon are in opposition, but the moon is also in opposition to Saturn, and Saturn's in Aries. And yeah, Saturn's not very comfortable in Aries. And when he's stressed out by the full moon, I think that's going to quite possibly bring up a lot of issues to do with authority and innocence, and a lot of themes to do with parental relationships, because Saturn often represents our parents or authority in our life. There's going to be a lot of things coming up. So in this half an hour-ish video, I'm going to lay down what I think are the key programs happening behind the scenes with this full moon, because I could say, oh, full moon in Libra, this is just about partnership. But it's so much more than that. And I think these points where a full moon or a new moon occur, they are important points for the next 2 weeks. They carry weight with them, even though these full moons and new moons occur and then the moon moves out of that position quite quickly. The results are they continue to impact us, a bit like throwing a stone into a water. A normal moon aspect, you won't get any ripples, but with a full moon or a new moon, you get ripples for the next 2 weeks. So this is really important if you are Aries or Libra, or if you've got a strong Aries or Libra. Also, if you've got Capricorn and Cancer, the other two cardinal signs, you'll really be feeling this. So what I want to do is unpack this, look at all of the planetary picture at the time of the full moon. I'm also going to be looking at the Sabian symbols for the full moon and the sun, because they always work in opposing pairs. I'm going to be looking at Linda Hill's amazing website. And then in the last section, I'm going to be looking specifically at any other bodies that are affecting this full moon picture. So with that, I'm always checking on serenu.com. It's a great little site, by the way, www. I think I've got links for it in my description field. Serenu, that's SERENNU.com. And you can, pop in the details of the full moon, hit go, and it will tell you what's interacting with it in a long list. And it's interesting because this time we've got 3 trans-Neptunian objects, and we've got 2 centaurs that are involved in this picture, creating what looks like it looks like a big square, and also known as a grand cross. So, and I'm going to be referring a little bit. I love this book. I was gifted this book last year by Alan Clay. It might have been even the year before. We did a couple of shows together about trans-Neptunian objects. I absolutely recommend this. So I will be giving you a little bit of information, just a tiny little snippet about what each of these trans-Neptunian objects represent. And obviously, if you want to know more, then check out his book and buy it and see where it sits in your chart. I just noticed that I've got Pluto over one of my trans-Neptunian objects, like right slap bang over it. So it is good to be aware of these things. So that's what I'm going to be doing. If you're new to this channel, by the way, my name's Louisa. Welcome to Feel Good Astrology. The aim here is to just describe astrological influences in such a way that you'll get a sense of freedom and clarity, and and it's my belief, as someone with 5 things in Sagittarius, that when we have a sense of freedom and a sense of clarity, that life feels good. That's what this is all about. Sometimes, it's not always, that possible to see the good. Sometimes we have aspects that floor us and we don't know what to do with them. And so, in those cases, I think it's interesting to just see what's coming up, so we're consciously aware of it. When we're consciously aware of things, we've got choice, really obvious choice of maybe how to handle things. So that's the whole purpose here. So anyway, let's get going. I'm going to bring up my charts because I like to work with something as a reference. Because obviously with my Sagittarian ways, I like to waffle. So this is an image of the full moon chart. I've set it to London. I live in the London time zone, just north of Lisbon, Portugal. And you can see that the full moon in Libra is at 12 degrees 21, which interestingly, I love numbers. And this is a mirror number, obviously, 1221. It's also asteroid. It's the asteroid number for Amor, which is 1221. And that's actually in a trine with the midheaven at the time of the full moon, which I kind of liked. But anyway, that aside, if you like numbers, you might like to check out where Amor is in your chart as well, because I think these things kind of ripple out. Anyway, the full moon in Libra. So sign of Libra absolutely is about balance. It's about things being fair and just. It's a sign of partnership, as you probably already know if you're following me on this channel. And it's ruled by Venus. So it's a Venusian moon. Now, ordinarily, when we get the moon in Libra, often we have a great amount of empathy for people. We want to connect with people. We really want to partner with people. And we really want to be kind of working in collaboration. It's very collaborative. It's very beautiful, in fact. They've got very, very high ideals for things being fair and for inclusion and things like that. A Libran energy is lovely. However, the moon, when it gets stressed, can really act out because it reminds us, I think, of our old wounds from the past, all the things that we've not learned to repair in our lives. They really come alive under the auspices of a full moon. Now, you would think the moon in Libra, ruled by Venus, it will be behaving really nicely, and it will want to be, but the energy of, is it fair? Is it right? Is it legal? Is it balanced? Is everyone involved? Is everyone included? That's going to be really pushed to its end. Now, the sun at this time is in the sign of Aries, which is very, very single-minded, very forceful, absolutely fiery. It acts first, thinks about it later, sometimes, not always. It seeks forgiveness later. It makes a decision in the moment. Absolutely, will do what needs to be done, and then comes back and thinks about it later if pushed. Now, you've also got Saturn here as well. Now, Saturn is not playing very fairly. In fact, he's in one of the worst signs for him ever. He doesn't perform very well in Aries. In fact, he's exalted in the sign of Libra, if I'm not mistaken. And that's where his need for structures and power and authority really seem to come alive when he's working with things legally and getting that balance right. So Saturn is wrong-footed here. And he's in a conjunction, albeit it's fading, but he is in a conjunction with the sun. So there is this very strong authoritative voice coming through. I always think that every part of the chart is just representing a different side of you, so what I'm seeing at the time of this full moon is there's a very, very strong authoritative part of us that's emerging, and it's demanding to be there. And at the same time, there's this maybe a moral conscience that is absolutely wanting to keep everything fair and legal and kind and good. And yet, when you're talking about this from this very split perspective, I always think the best point is to get into the middle, where emotions and fairness and inclusion do not take over, but also where the need for selfishness and the need for having your own way also doesn't take precedent. And with these full moons, it always looks like it's either this or that there's no balance. But I think the challenge here at the time of the full moon is to recognize both sides of these characters belong within you, and they both have a role. You're not meant to be in the selfish, single-minded part of your life all the time. And similarly, you're not meant to be braiding everyone's hair and singing Kumbaya together. You know, you're meant to be using different parts of your intellect and personality for different things at different times as the need arises. And so I really see that this full moon is very situational, really situational. Now, obviously, we could apply this out of yourself into your local community, well, in your family, your local community, you know, the country you live in, and to the world and to world politics. And I'm sure this will apply. However we're looking at it, we can probably really easily see these energies playing out already just in the media. But yes, this is very strong. The moon here might feel very overpowered. So we might feel very overpowered by something coming in from the outside, like a strong authority. We might be hypersensitive to anything that's telling us what to do, how to do it, especially if it seems forceful and selfish. And it may well remind us of every interaction we've had with selfish people in the past, you know, that have taken, but not really given, you know. So it really is a case of give and take. And yet there'll be a part of you that is sick and tired of an energy that seems to be like getting its own way under the guise of fairness. You know, fairness is fairness, but there's also the idea that, like, if you give everything to fairness, your like own ego, your own individuality, your own energy may well be dissipated and kind of sucked out of you. So it's about getting the balance right. Like, how much of shit do you need to give about things right now? And also, when does caring too much get too much? So it's finding the balance between the two. And, you know, I'm not saying this to cause offense, by the way. So if you're feeling offended, you know, it's not my intention. And yeah, maybe I'm not the right one for you. But, you know, this is about getting the balance, because when things go too far one way, there is always, absolutely always, a backlash. And similarly, when it goes back the other way, there's a massive backlash. And, you know, like later on, in just 2 weeks' time from here, we've got the new moon in Aries in a conjunction with Chiron. So it's particularly snippy and particularly hurt. And we've got 4 other planets in Aries. So there's going to be Mercury, Neptune, Mars, Saturn, the Sun, the Moon, and Chiron all working together at the same time. Now, this is going to be really where energy is going one way. And so, yeah, this is why I'm really sort of like hammering home the idea that right now, the best thing we can do is get into balance, because if we go one way or another, we could absolutely get toppled over in the coming weeks. Now, that doesn't mean, because we're going into a massive Aries time, that right now we should favor the Libra. But I think the best place to be is, I mean, if you like, this looks like a flat circle, but actually, what if it's a sphere? You know, if it's a sphere, then this midpoint is actually like the top of the dome, or you could even see like the top of a mountain. From that perspective, you can see all the way around. You can see the whole story. But when we're in our Libra selves, getting upset because things aren't fair or right, or, you know, we feel messed around in love, or, you know, my kids have got a load of chocolates at the moment, and they're sharing them out between them, and there's all sorts of arguments coming out because, you know, has somebody got a slightly bigger chocolate? I mean, they are going through it very methodically, and actually the love of eating chocolate has actually just been killed for them in the process. So it's like, how do you see the process? How do you come back into balance? How do you come back into the middle? And find your peace there. That's what this is about, I would say. And when you think of Libra as, you know, if you were to think of an animal that you might associate with Libra, I would think of the dove of peace, the dove of, you know, being in good accord with each other, you know, this lovely agreement. This is a place where we handshake, you know, we come together in agreement with each other. However, you know, sometimes we just need to react from our real selves and not maybe put on a display of finesse when maybe actually we just want to scoff all the chocolates ourselves. So yeah, some real big things going on here, and I'm sure you can apply this to your own life. We've also got the ongoing Neptune Saturn conjunction that's absolutely adding into this situation. You'll notice here there's an S next to most of these and a couple of A's. The S's are showing where an aspect has already happened exactly, and they're now separating. So they're losing their power, but they're still important. And the A's are showing where things are applying. So they're coming into that conjunction right now. So Neptune and Saturn, they've been in a conjunction since an exact conjunction since February the 20th this year. But they've been actually in a conjunction for many months and still will be mostly throughout this year. They come out of conjunction for a couple of months and then they still go back into it when Saturn goes retrograde later on. But, you know, I think of this as, you know, a very idealistic energy, and Neptune, you know, which is dreamy, wants to merge with everything, higher love, unconditional love, deeply creative, absolutely beautiful, wanting to get structure. So there is this like beautiful structure that wants to emerge in your life, and you know, it's wanting to emerge in your life in an Aries way, not in a Libra way. So there is, you know, potentially a really transforming energy that's trying to arrive here in human consciousness, or at least, you know, in your own life, you know, something that where you bring your own personal heaven to earth and you manifest it and you start to bring it about. You know, maybe you got a book or a hobby or a child, or, you know, there's something brewing. It might be a new love affair, but there's something good and creative and that allows you to use your beautiful sensitivity and to ground it into your experience. So there is this energy already playing into this. And in fact, this energy might make you want to switch off to people a little bit and to go deeper into your own selfish contemplation. And, you know, I'm using selfish with bunny ears because, you know, from a Libra perspective, it might look like when someone goes off on their own and does stuff on their own and deep dives into their own stuff, it could look like they're suddenly excluded. They're excluded from the partnership or the group of friends or something, you know. But right now there's a very personal process happening for most people, and it might be better served in our own space, in our own time. But we've learned over the years that if people do stuff on their own or treat themselves to things on their own or are self-serving, that they are selfish and it's a bad thing. Now, I'm going to say it's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, it depends where you're viewing it from. If you're viewing it from Libra, it may well look bad. But if you're viewing it from, you know, a sense of, hey, I'm on the path of my own evolution, then it's actually, you know, why not? You know. Now, the difficulty is Neptune, you know, if it's negatively inspired, might not want to be bringing heaven to earth. And Saturn, if he's negatively inspired, he becomes very dictatorial, especially in Aries, gets very forceful. And so there could be something deeply immoral or icky or nasty, you know, evolving that you're aware of, you know, trying to manifest. And of course, you know, the Libra moon side of you right now would absolutely see that. So I guess the question is, what do you see that's evolving? What do you see that's trying to grow legs right now? What do you see that consciousness is gifting you in this life? What is trying to manifest right now? Do you need to go and have a little bit of private time to be able to get this together? Sometimes we actually need a bit of silence and calm, so we tune into ourselves and know how to move forwards. You know, I know I have to get loads of time to myself, because without that, how can I truly listen to my own intuition and Neptune coming into Aries is bringing intuition to self. So that's something that's also playing into this full moon. And that, I think, if you've been in a close relationship for a long time and you notice that your partner, or maybe you're both needing to get a bit of time apart. It's not to say that the relationship is falling apart. It's just that as part of your evolution, you're processing something independently, intuitively, and on your own. And you need some silence, you need some space. So that's also underpinning this. Now, we've just had the North Node in a conjunction to Mercury, I think last week. Both of them are in Pisces. To me, it shows that there's some very deep intuitive thoughts and patterns and symbols that are coming up right now, helping us to know that we're on track. When we get a sense of them and then we see them in our real life, it's like, I knew that. How did I not see that before? And then it's like, whoa, I've got the confirmation. It's like hindsight. It's like deja vu. You get to see something. It's like something invisible, and then boom, there it is in your life. So follow the clues. Keep following the clues. That is part of this process right now. Follow the clues. If something pops on the radio, if a link finds you and you're wondering, how the hell did that find me? I wasn't asking for that. Have a look. It might be something that you need to see right now. And Mercury is starting to pick up speed. He has just recently been retrograde. And so the intuitive thinking function is going to become stronger and stronger. Now, also, Mercury is coming into, so he's applying into an aspect later on this week, where he's going to be exact with Jupiter. Now, both of them rule opposite signs. And so they can be a little bit oppositional. Mercury brings up words and sentences and facts and figures, and is a lot more logical, whereas Jupiter, especially exalted in Cancer, he's full of myth and rich awareness, and tells long stories about things that maybe Mercury could explain into two sentences. However, this trine is beautiful because it's saying that succinct sentences are needed, but we also need to have the feeling that is evoked through stories, and that feeling that is evoked through ancestry. Jupiter's very ancestral in the sign of Cancer. And so these two working together, I really feel like we're tuning into ancestral stories. We're tuning into ancestral human stories. We're getting a sense of things, and Mercury is putting it into words or images in your brain. So to me, I feel like, we're all feeling it in our waters right now. And we might need some silence to be able to hear it properly, so that we can really see it as a huge story, and really make sense of it, really see it. At this time as well, Venus has just been in a conjunction to Chiron. And so we're aware of maybe where we've fallen out with people, where relationships have come and gone. Maybe we've been healing those. I do think for a lot of us, we're able to forgive some of the old characters in our past, especially if you can get into that middle view, that midpoint view. It really helps us to see that, every good relationship and every bad relationship has really moved us on in our journey. It's really helped us. So I do think there's a recent acknowledgement of healing, or a recent letting go of an old story. And then we've also got this, and I think this has actually got so much more to do with everything that's going on right now, because this is a pattern made by the outer planets. So we've got Pluto, we've got Neptune, and we've got Uranus, and also Saturn nearby. And they're making what looks, it's a minor grand trine, but it also looks like a pair of knickers. That's what we call them in England. I don't know what they're called everywhere else. Pants? I don't know. But this girdle, or this pair of knickers, this cradle, with air and fire, and it has been air, but it's now water. It's now earth here. But it's very fast flowing. Pluto in a trine to Uranus is fast flowing. It's really showing deep transformation and a deep release, and a deep change, a change in consciousness. Of course, you can't change your consciousness unless you're changing your identity. And that's where this Aries stuff all comes in, because it's all about the identity. And so Neptune and Saturn here, I think, there's a beautiful promise of your new identity coming in, something that you're feeling, you're intuiting, you're knowing, inner knowing that is transforming your sense of self. And yes, we're feeling it. And because of that, our consciousness is changing. And that things that we might have had very strong views about 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or even just 2 minutes ago, it's like we look at it again and we think, no, I feel very differently now. So things are transforming at quite a speed. And you can see how everything is so lopsided here as well. Obviously, we're going to come into this time when this is going to be crowded out, really from like mid-April. This is packed out, really packed out. And by that time, Venus is coming into this lovely conjunction with Uranus, really helping serendipity to come in and to create a new kind of relationships with people as well. So, where we're going from, this full moon, where all of a sudden it feels like, okay, I've just got to find a midway between trying to be fair and at the same time ignoring self, versus being all about self and maybe being unfair. We've got to find this midpoint. And then, this midpoint comes in and we're getting to recode what we think of ourselves as. It's a real time of recoding. So let's have a look now in terms of Sabian symbols. What does the Sabian symbol say about this full moon? So this is where the moon in Libra is. And I quite like this. Children blowing soap bubbles. So this symbol shows issues to do with play, make-believe, and fantasy. It's through simplicity and imagination that children come together and enjoy play that is sometimes meaningless and yet very important to development. There's often a sense of being on the surface, not delving very deeply into life. However, there needs to be a light-hearted attitude and not always be deep and meaningful, for it will be in the fleeting moments of fun that you will find pleasure, joy, and companionship. There can be a feeling, however, of a lack of depth in relating, like things that are said are like cartoon captions with little substance behind them. So this is about spending time being creative with children, drama, optimism, like Pollyanna attitudes, toys, playing, acting, cartoons, escapist attitudes, fun for the sake of fun, simple joys. When it goes a bit wonky is if we're like not growing up, if we've got like Peter Pan attitudes, we're daydreaming, making light of things that are really serious. But I think what is coming up with this idea of the moon is, this full moon could get absolutely offended and feel very justified to be offended because of Saturn and the sun's very overbearing ways in Aries right now. And so it could feel absolutely peed off, fed up, and it's not going to smile. Like Venus, when she's petulant, she doesn't smile, she kind of pouts. And this is really saying that actually we really need the play, we really need the fantasy, we still need to let go. Even when life looks really bleak, we absolutely need to have fun and let off steam and be innocent in the moment. Now, I always think these balance out when you look at where the sun is. Now, I don't look at these ahead of time, by the way. I just copy and paste, again, from Linda Hill's amazing website. I really recommend this. You'll get so much wisdom and depth about your chart, so much knowledge if you take a look at her wonderful site or even invest in her book. Sun in Aries. Oh, a bomb which failed to explode is now safely hidden from discovery. Okay. So, and if you're wondering why it says 13, when you go to sabiansymbols.com and you put in 12 Aries or whatever your degree is, it always gets rounded up, because obviously this is 1221, so it gets rounded up to 13. So the sun in Aries, in its conjunction with Saturn, it's saying the symbol shows that explosive elements need discharging. Pressure cooker energy needs to be released, but it often needs to be done slowly and carefully. By keeping a sense of control, one can handle wild situations, elements, or people without things getting out of hand. Be an example to others of how calmness and quiet can take the charge out of things. Take whatever opportunities you can diffuse elements, as an explosion often damages more than it's expected. Did I miss a light? No, I didn't. You may have to hide something away so that things don't get crazy, but with some careful thought, all should be well. Tantrums, frustrations, rash emotional actions and decisions, intelligence, organizations, valuable lessons of self-restraint, simmering tempers, diffusing situations. It obviously goes really badly if, you're keeping things safe is actually repressing one's emotions, so watch out for that. But to me, one of the things about this full moon is we're supposed to be letting off some of our tension by innocently blowing bubbles and having fun. So these are actually working beautifully together. They don't always work that well together, but this is really clearly saying to me that yes, this could be a very, very tense and tight moment with this particular full moon coming up. But no matter how tense and serious it gets, we need to be more like children, not having temper tantrums, but by amusing ourselves with the next thing that catches our imagination. It's about flexing and moving divinely in the flow of what's going on right now. So let's have a look at some of these asteroids and other things. In fact, there's no, the asteroids we've got are called Centaurs. So we've got Thereus, the Centaur. He's got a really nasty personality and a reputation. He's like a stalker. So he's in a conjunction with the moon, suggesting that there's something in this Libra energy that is lurking, then pouncing on prey. Now, this is an interesting one because I remember years ago getting really offended by something somebody said. It was my husband, in fact. He mentioned how people pleasing can be manipulative, and it was a new one on me. I was really, really surprised because I just thought, I'm a massive people pleaser. And he was questioning where it was coming from. Was it coming from a good place? Was it coming from a childhood strategy? And I could definitely see where people pleasing came from as a childhood strategy. But I didn't think it was all an act. I didn't think it was all strategy. And I do think, it is in my nature to actually be a bit of a people pleaser. But the suggestion is that people pleasers learn a strategy to make things work, to make them safer. But in effect, they have needs and use niceness to get their needs met. And I think Libra really falls into this, especially this full moon in Libra. And of course, if you've associated your personality and your identity with being nice, I mean, it does a couple of things. One thing, if somebody mentions, hang on, what's behind that niceness? Is that niceness false? Have you created that niceness just to protect yourself? That's really, really offensive to hear that, that when you're being nice and you're doing the right thing, that it could be manipulative. It's hard to hear. I'm just talking straight from my own experience. But it's also possible from this position of niceness, like killing someone softly or killing someone with kindness, is a little bit like lurking, then pouncing on the prey. Thereus, he observes his prey for a really long time before he takes action. And he kind of disappears into the background to really see what's going on. So seeing him so close to the moon, to me, is making me question, maybe this full moon, aside of all the other meanings to do with Libra, maybe he's also there to ask you, where are you actually waiting for someone to slip up whilst you're being nice? It's there to give you a little bit of a nudge. And if someone's being really, really nice to you, you might ask yourself, hang on a sec, something else going on here. Therius is, cruel, savage, mercenary. He drags off bears. He kind of like drags them through the woods, banging their heads and stuff. And there's like no kindness, no finesse at all. He's like a really massive bully. But it's interesting, at the time of this full moon, he is in a conjunction with it. To me, it makes me wonder if the full moon is a bit like a weapon, used against us, that might be used against you, that might be used against everyone. Something to watch out for. Where is kindness? Where is fairness? Where is justice actually used as a weapon against people? Where is this mercenary energy? But then we've also got MakeMake, a trans-Neptunian object. Now, like I said, I'm not an expert on this at all, like really not at all. I've interviewed Alan Clay twice. I've got his book, and I've read through it cover to cover, and it was brilliant. Really good. I do recommend it, but I'm not an expert. But MakeMake is a higher level of consciousness than Mercury and Uranus. So, like Mercury is very much terrestrial knowledge and sharing, and human brotherhood and the sort of communication that goes between us. Uranus is like a transpersonal level of consciousness that comes to us, and then we've got MakeMake that's like a cosmic consciousness. So it's all about consciousness and thought, and also it's quite participatory because of Mercury, but it's like 2 steps away from Mercury. It's higher. So this is also asking you, how are you part of the cosmic consciousness right now? And how might you be playing with reality? Because, if you think of the law of attraction, we've been taught that the words we use, the ideas we create in our heads, all of our images and our sort of senses are communicating to us, are calling us the life that we might want to participate in. And of course, when we get friends chatting with us, we're creating a universe together. To me, this is asking, do you feel like you are part of cosmic consciousness? Are you really here to play with reality? I mean, Uranus is transpersonal, and what we learn from him is some thoughts can be very disturbing because they bring about like a hard change straight away. But like the next level up, the cosmic consciousness, is a bit of humor around it. We're playing with reality where good and bad might be viewed completely differently, because it takes us almost out of being human, our human self. It's almost talking to our soul. So to me, with MakeMake and Therius working with this full moon, maybe victimhood, maybe fairness and passivity are a game in their own right. Maybe we're going to see that. We're going to see how this game takes place. I don't know. That's just one thought that has come up for me. Then we've got Quaour, another trans-Neptunian object, at 12 degrees Capricorn, in a square to the moon and in a square to the sun. This is actually the most exact of these aspects, this square to Quaour. And he's like a higher consciousness of Jupiter. If you think of Jupiter, I mean, obviously Jupiter's known for enjoying a bit of a good time, but he's also very faithful and spiritual in his own way. I mean, he's a bit wild as well, but Jupiter does bring a sense of what else is possible, what else do I not know yet, and this kind of reverence for life. And so if you think of Jupiter and then take him so much higher, like, how are you bringing spirit into your own lives? How can you dance and sing and kind of celebrate the cosmic energy to transform your life? How can you give thanks for life really dynamically? This is really asking you to get into the celebration of life. So far be it from this full moon to create difficulties in many ways, this is asking, can you see how what's going on right now is a performance, and we're all part of it, no matter how real it feels. You know, there's a much higher spiritual aspect here. Again, I realize as I say this, it might sound like I'm judging you if you're feeling into a really hard time right now. I know I've had some really hard times, and it feels absolutely personal, and you really feel into the trauma of what's going on, no matter what's going on. This is just giving us a different perspective. It's not saying that in your human form, in this actual real life human body, with all of your human relationships, that shit's not happening. It's absolutely not saying that. However, Quaour is giving us a different perspective, kind of an out of body, perspective, suggesting that we are still all part of this dance, and we can participate in it, and we can sing, we can dance, and we can give thanks. And there is, I think, the implication that when we give thanks, all of a sudden our life starts getting a little bit more magical. Now, Pholos, a centaur, is also in a conjunction with Quaour, and this is interesting because he's quite an unlucky centaur. So he is guarding all the sacred wines of the gods. He's supposed to keep it all safe. This reminds me a bit of Pandora's box as well. He takes the lid off something. He kind of opens up the wine. All the centaurs get off their faces. And is it Heracles that like shoots arrows, poisoned arrows with Hydra's blood into him and kills a load? The Pholos then picks up an arrow, drops it on his foot, and dies. So he is curious about something, lifting the lid off something, and the truth of it is so devastating that it kind of wipes them all out, and it's accidental self-harm. You know, he's a bit of a wally, because he uncovers something, and then it kind of explodes in his face. And that's interesting when you see Quaour and Pholos together. Maybe in celebrating, maybe in faith, maybe in feeling the expanse of life, and feeling really, genuinely at grace with life. Maybe that is like taking the lid off something. It's like taking the lid off, what it is to be human, like seeing beyond your human frailty and seeing that you're also a spirit. And that you're massive, you're so much bigger than the body that you identify with. And maybe that is the thing that kind of explodes your life a little bit. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it's kind of filling you up with divinity. I see this as a very sort of awakening moment, really awakening. And then we've got Salacia in a conjunction with the sun, also not a million miles away from Saturn. Again, I've been referring to Alan's book, and Salacia is a goddess who helps us to embrace true love and divine timing. She's predictive. She can help you see into the future, and she also helps you to take a leap of faith. Again, these are, if you think of our planets, they're really kind of managing us or showing us our human form. The transpersonal planets, so Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they're helping us see a third-party perspective of ourselves. They help us to see the game we might be playing on Earth, and just they kind of shock us awake a little bit. They show up as outside influences. And then we've got these trans-Neptunian objects, which are just kind of, to me, it feels like soul acting without fear, without any of the human. This is like soul free to express itself. And so Salacia here, I really see that, we can take a leap of faith, and we can be handling deep and troubling times in our life, because Salacia is not in that position where she feels bogged down in the human form. She feels magnificent, embracing true love. And she can see what's happening and how every one of her behaviors takes her on to the next part of the story, and the next part, and the next part. And so the sun here and Salacia, I think, is really quite poignant, because to me it's describing us being in our own awareness, not listening to the awareness of everyone else around us, but we have to feel into it ourselves. We have to absolutely know what's right by us. If we're always taking on other people's morality, other people's sensibilities, other people's feelings, and then applying it to ourselves, it's going to be very difficult and conflicting. I know in my family, you know, when we have a family lunch, I've got 3 kids, got my husband, and, you know, I'll say, okay, so what's everyone want to do for the afternoon or something? And they all come up with a different idea. And in the end, I say, okay, how about we do this, which will incorporate this, 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 and this. And then I realize, shit, where's my voice? Like, where's my idea? Where's what, you know, what do I want? And I realize I have no idea what I want, you know. So to me, this is about us coming back into our own sovereignty, coming back into our own mind, so that we can absolutely know that what we're creating in our life with the glory of God or the universe or energy, whatever, that it absolutely, it lands. It's something that we really do want. And we're not just having preferences because we've been told what's good, we've been told what's right, we've been told that this person gets upset if they don't have it like this. You know, this is about us coming into our own consciousness and being mature enough to see that, you know, maybe when we are all free to make our own decisions with no guilt, no trips from other people, that we can actually make a really good and right decision for ourselves. So to me, that's how I'm interpreting it. I wonder how you're interpreting it. But I actually think this is quite a lid turner. You know, I do think we're going to be taking the lid off something with this particular full moon. So wishing you a beautiful explore of this full moon. I hope it's amazing. And like I said, you know, 2 weeks time, we're coming into a very, very strong Aries time, where whatever comes up with this full moon, you can absolutely work at it single-mindedly and really bring it in. If, like me, you feel like you've lost a bit of yourself along the way over the last 5 years or so, then this might be the time when you start to bring back all those thoughts of who you were. You remember who you were, and then you start to you start again from your unique voice. So there you go. They're my thoughts. If you want to know more, if you'd like to work with me, then just invite me to work with you. All of my links are below. You can also join me for free in my community on the school platform. That's skool.com/feelgoodastrology, where I release free forecasts every day. Well, Monday to Friday, but it covers the whole week. So maybe catch you very soon. Lots of love. Bye for now.